The scope's crosshairs settled on a man's temple. Saigon, 1972. The rooftop reeked of gunpowder and monsoon rain. Through the heat shimmer rising from tar paper, the shooter's finger found the trigger with the tenderness of a prayer. 800 yards. Impossible for most men. Routine for Robert "Ghost" Reeves. The rifle spoke once. The target dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Static crackled through the radio receiver beside him, urgent and metallic. Ghost actual, target eliminated. Reeves, you're clear for extraction. But Robert Reeves didn't move. Not yet. His left forearm rested against the rifle stock, and in the fading light of that April evening, ink caught the last rays of dying sun. A tattoo. Delta Force insignia wrapped around muscle and scar tissue. Below it, numbers. A unit designation that didn't exist in any official record. The camera would have captured it all, if anyone had been filming. But some operations leave no trace except in the memories of the men who survived them. 52 years later, that same tattoo would appear again. On younger skin, softer features, a woman's shoulder. The connection between these two moments, separated by half a century and an ocean of secrets, would soon shatter the carefully constructed lies that powerful men had spent decades protecting. Camp Pendleton blazed under a June sun that showed no mercy. Heat waves distorted the horizon where the Pacific met California desert, creating mirages that looked almost like hope. Elena Reeves stepped off the transport bus with 43 other recruits, her boots hitting tarmac that felt hot enough to melt rubber. 22 years old, 5'7", 130 pounds of determination wrapped in government-issued fatigues that still smelled like the warehouse they'd been stored in. Her dark hair, regulation length, pulled back so tight it made her temples ache. Brown eyes that had learned early how to hide what they'd seen. Around her, the other recruits shuffled into something resembling formation. Young men mostly, with a handful of women scattered through the ranks like punctuation marks in a sentence written by tradition. They carried the nervous energy of people who'd signed contracts they didn't fully understand, trading civilian comfort for the slim possibility of becoming something extraordinary. Elena carried something heavier, a name, a legacy, a ghost. Drill Sergeant Kane materialized from the heat shimmer like violence given human form. 6'4", 240 pounds, with a voice that could strip paint and a face that suggested he'd been carved from granite by someone who'd run out of patience halfway through the job. "Welcome to selection," he announced, though his tone suggested they were anything but welcome. "You are not soldiers. You are not operators. You are barely civilians. For the next 12 weeks, you will be tested in ways that will make you question every decision that brought you to this moment." Elena had already questioned those decisions. Every mile of the bus ride from San Diego, every signature on every form, every night for the past 6 months, since her mother's funeral, since finding the journal hidden in a lockbox beneath floorboards that creaked with secrets. "Some of you will quit," Kane continued, pacing the formation with the measured steps of a predator. "Most of you will fail. The few who remain will have earned the right to call yourselves candidates for special operations. But today, right now, you are nothing." His eyes scanned the formation, cataloging weaknesses, noting fear. When his gaze passed over Elena, she kept her face neutral, her posture correct. She'd learned that skill young, how to be invisible while standing in plain sight. "Fall out, collect your gear, formation in 30 minutes. If you're late, you're gone." The formation dissolved into controlled chaos. Elena moved with the crowd toward the supply depot, keeping her distance, watching, always watching. That was when she first saw him. Colonel Jack Harrison stood apart from the controlled mayhem. 62 years old, but carrying those years like a weapon he'd learned to wield with precision. His uniform bore the weight of ribbons that told stories he'd never repeat in polite company. Vietnam Service Medal, Bronze Star with V device, Purple Heart with 3 oak leaf clusters. A career spent in places where maps grew vague, and operations had names like Urgent Fury and Just Cause. He held a clipboard, but he wasn't looking at it. He was looking at the roster sheet clipped to its surface, at a name that had made his hands stop moving, at letters that spelled out a ghost from 1985. Reeves, Elena M. His jaw tightened. The muscle there jumped once, twice, a tell that 40 years of covert operations hadn't quite erased. Around him, other training cadre moved with purpose, barking orders, establishing dominance. Harrison remained still, a stone in a river of activity, because he'd known her father, had fought beside Robert Reeves in jungles and deserts where the only law was the one you carried in your holster, had watched that man walk into darkness on an April night in 1985, chasing ghosts and traitors, never to return. And now the daughter had come, to the same world, the same machinery of violence and purpose that had consumed her father. Harrison's hand moved to his pocket, found the coin he'd carried for 39 years. A challenge coin from a unit that didn't exist, given to him by a man officially declared dead, killed in action during an operation that had no name. He flipped it once, caught it, felt its familiar weight. Then he did what men like him always did. He compartmentalized, filed the emotion away, became the mission. But his eyes tracked Elena Reeves as she moved through the supply depot, studied the way she moved, economical, aware, like someone who'd been taught to navigate hostile environments, just like her father. The barracks smelled like industrial cleaner and anxiety. 60 recruits divided into 4 squad bays, 15 bunks each, arranged with the geometric precision the military demanded from chaos. Elena claimed a bunk in the back corner, tactically sound, wall on 2 sides, clear line of sight to both exits. Her bunkmate materialized while she was stowing gear. Nina Rodriguez, 23, former signals intelligence specialist from Fort Bragg, trying to move up the food chain. Sharp eyes behind Army-issue glasses, hands that moved with the confidence of someone who understood circuits and code. Reeves, right? Nina's voice carried the rhythms of Texas border towns. Saw your name on the roster. Any relation to Robert Reeves? Elena's hands stopped moving, just for a moment, but Nina caught it. The ghost of Saigon? Nina continued, apparently unaware she just lobbed a grenade into the conversation. My grandfather served with a Robert Reeves in Vietnam, said he was the best shot he'd ever seen, could hit targets at distances that shouldn't be possible. Elena resumed unpacking. Her voice came out flat, practiced. Common name. Nina nodded, but her eyes suggested she didn't believe it. Sure, common. The conversation died there, smothered by the weight of things left unsaid. Around them, other recruits engaged in the careful dance of first impressions, establishing pecking orders, forming alliances that might last through hell or break at the first sign of pressure. Marcus Webb held court near the center of the bay. 24 years old, former college football player from Texas, built like someone who'd been genetically engineered to cause damage. His voice carried the easy confidence of someone who'd never met a challenge he couldn't muscle through. 12 weeks, he announced to anyone listening. I'll be top of the class. Already got word that Delta is watching this selection cycle. Tyler Grant, barely 19, looked up from the bunk where he was struggling with a regulation bed-making technique that seemed designed to break spirits. You really think you can make it through? Marcus flexed. Actually flexed. Son, I benched 345 in college, ran a 4.440. Special operations is just football with guns. Elena turned away, hiding the expression that threatened to break through her careful mask. She'd known men like Marcus, all muscle and confidence until the first bullet came looking for them. Then they learned that strength meant nothing if you couldn't control the fear that came with it. Sergeant Kane's voice echoed through the bay. First formation in 5 minutes. Fallout in PT gear. And ladies and gentlemen, I suggest you get comfortable with disappointment, because that's all you're going to feel for the next 3 months. The barracks exploded into motion. Elena changed quickly, efficiently, not caring who saw the scars. The thin white line across her ribs from a car accident that wasn't quite an accident. The burn mark on her left shoulder blade from a camping stove that had malfunctioned while she and her mother lived out of a station wagon for 3 months. But she kept the tattoo covered, the one on her upper left shoulder, the one that matched her father's. That would wait for the right moment, or the wrong one. The first physical training session sorted the strong from the wishful inside 20 minutes. 3-mile run in full gear. Obstacle course. Calisthenics until muscle failure wasn't a possibility, but a certainty. Elena paced herself, stayed in the middle of the pack, never first, never last. Invisible again. But her form was too clean, her breathing too controlled. She moved like someone who'd done this before, in circumstances where failure meant more than just embarrassment. Harrison watched from the observation tower, made notes that had nothing to do with physical performance. He'd seen this pattern before. The deliberate mediocrity, the calculated averages, someone trying very hard not to stand out, someone with something to hide. At the rifle range that afternoon, Elena's cover started to slip. The M4 carbine felt like coming home. Her hands moved through the weapon check with the unconscious competence of muscle memory. Breathing, stance, sight picture, trigger control, elements her father had taught her starting at age 8, in empty fields where the only witnesses were crows and conscience. The first shot surprised her, center mass. The second followed before she realized she'd pulled the trigger. Same hole. The third. The fourth. By the 10th round, the target looked like someone had carefully cut a ragged circle in the paper. The range master, a weathered gunnery sergeant who'd seen 3 wars and countless recruits, walked down the line, stopped at Elena's lane, stared at the target. "Reeves, where'd you learn to shoot?" The lie came smooth as silk. She'd practiced it. "My uncle, Arizona, grew up hunting." "Your uncle teach you trigger control like that? Breathing, discipline, follow through?" He was thorough. The gunny's eyes narrowed. Thorough, right. He moved on, but his skepticism hung in the air like cordite. Marcus, 3 lanes down, had managed to hit the target approximately 60% of the time. His grouping looked like a shotgun pattern. "Damn, Reeves," he called over. "You sure you're not prior service? Shoot like a ranger." "Just got lucky." "That's not luck, darling. That's years of practice." Elena said nothing, reloaded, put another group downrange, this time deliberately spreading the shots, making them look more human, more fallible. But Harrison had seen the first group, had photographed it with a long lens camera he carried for documentation purposes, would add it to the file that was growing thicker with questions. The third week brought the psychological evaluations. Dr. Sarah Chen's office existed in a different world from the sweat and violence of the training grounds. Air conditioning, soft lighting, furniture designed for comfort rather than punishment. The walls held certificates and commendations that suggested a woman who'd spent decades studying what made warriors tick. Elena sat across from her in a chair that felt too comfortable, too soft, like sitting in quicksand. "Tell me about your family," Dr. Chen began. Standard opening, neutral tone, eyes that missed nothing. Elena delivered her prepared answer. "Single mother. She passed 6 months ago. Cancer. I'm here to honor her memory and serve my country." "And your father?" The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Never knew him." Dr. Chen made a note. "The intake forms list your father as deceased. Killed in action, 1985. You would have been not born yet. Yet you list him as deceased rather than absent or unknown. Why?" Elena's hands remained still in her lap. Another practice skill. "Because that's what my mother told me. He died serving his country. That's all I needed to know." "Is it?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Dr. Chen leaned back, creating space, inviting confession. Ms. Reeves, in my experience, people who join special operations training usually have something to prove, to themselves, to others, or to ghosts. Which category do you fall into? Elena met her eyes. Maybe all three. That's honest. More honest than most recruits manage in their first session. Dr. Chen tapped her pen against her notepad, a tell of her own. But I sense there's something you're not telling me, something that brought you here beyond patriotism or family honor. Isn't that enough? For some people, not for you. The pen stopped tapping. I've reviewed hundreds of candidates. The ones who make it through aren't the strongest or the fastest. They're the ones with the clearest understanding of why they're here. So I'll ask again, Ms. Reeves, why are you really here? Elena considered her answer, weighed truth against security, settled on something in between. My father's last letter to my mother, before he died, he wrote that some men spend their whole lives looking for a purpose. He'd found his, wearing the uniform, protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. I guess I want to see if I have what he had. And if you don't, then at least I'll know. Dr. Chen nodded slowly, made another note. We'll continue this next week. But Ms. Reeves, I'd encourage you to examine your motivations more carefully. Because revenge, even against circumstances, isn't a sustainable foundation for the kind of work we do here. Elena stood. It's not revenge, Doctor. It's inheritance. She left before Dr. Chen could respond, but the psychologist's eyes followed her out, troubled, seeing patterns that didn't quite fit the story being told. Week 4 brought night navigation training. 50 recruits, divided into teams of 5, given coordinates and 8 hours to reach extraction points, scattered across 20,000 acres of California wilderness. No lights, no GPS, just maps, compasses, and the kind of pressure that separated the competent from the confident. Elena's team consisted of Marcus, Nina, Tyler, and a quiet kid from Montana named Davis, who could read terrain like poetry. They moved through darkness that felt alive, hostile, testing. 2 hours in, Marcus wanted to take point. Elena let him. Leadership wasn't about dominance. It was about knowing when to lead and when to let others learn through failure. They got lost inside 30 minutes. We need to be heading northwest, Marcus insisted, his compass reading suggesting otherwise. Trust me, I've got natural direction sense. Nina checked her own compass. Natural sense is telling you wrong. We're going northeast. We'll miss the checkpoint by 3 miles. I played football in weather worse than this. I know. You knew where the end zone was because someone painted it on the grass. Elena's voice cut through the argument, quiet, but carrying weight. Nina's right. We adjust course now, or we fail. Marcus turned, surprised to hear her speak. She'd been silent for most of the exercise. You sure? Elena pulled out her map, used a red lens flashlight to study the topography. Davis, what's that sound? Southwest, maybe 400 meters? Davis tilted his head, listened. Creek. Seasonal drainage, probably dry this time of year. It's not on the map. Old maps. Terrain changes. Elena nodded. Which means we're here, not where Marcus thought. Nina's course correction puts us back on track. They adjusted. Made the checkpoint with 20 minutes to spare. The next 3 teams wouldn't arrive for another hour. At the rally point, warming by the fire the cadre had built, Marcus sidled up to Elena. Where'd you learn land nav like that? YouTube. Bull, you read that map like you've done it under fire. Elena stared into the flames. Maybe I just pay attention. But Tyler, sitting nearby, had noticed something else. During the course correction, when Elena had pulled out her map, her sleeve had ridden up. Just for a moment, just enough. He glimpsed dark ink on her shoulder. Military style, significant somehow. The kind of thing that told stories people didn't want heard. He didn't say anything, but he filed it away. Added it to the growing collection of details that didn't quite add up about Elena Reeves. Harrison made his decision during week 5. The pieces weren't fitting together. And in his experience, when pieces didn't fit, it meant someone was hiding the actual picture. He called in a favor, the kind of favor that men with his background could call in once, maybe twice in a lifetime. A contact at Langley, someone who owed him from Lebanon, from operations that had no official record. I need background on a recruit, Elena Reeves, 22, mother deceased, father listed as Robert Reeves, KIA 1985. The silence on the other end lasted 3 seconds too long. You said Robert Reeves? You know the name. Jack, that file is sealed, has been for 40 years, above my clearance level, which tells me everything I need to know. It should tell you to stop asking questions. Harrison watched the recruits through his office window, Elena among them, running the obstacle course again, pushing herself past exhaustion into the territory where the body quit and the mind had to take over. She deserves to know the truth about her father. Maybe, but maybe the truth will destroy her. Some secrets get classified for good reasons, and some get classified to protect the guilty. The contact side. Static crackled across the secure line. I'll see what I can do, but Jack, if I were you, I'd be very careful about opening doors that were sealed for a reason. What you find behind them might not be what you expect. The line went dead. Harrison set down the phone, looked at the photograph on his desk. Himself and Robert Reeves, Delta Force, 1983. Young men who thought they were immortal, invincible, inevitable. One of them had been wrong about all three. And now the daughter had come, carrying secrets she might not even know she possessed, hunting ghosts that might still be hunting her. Harrison had survived 3 wars and 100 operations by trusting his instincts. Those instincts were screaming now, telling him that Elena Reeves was about to bring something dangerous into the light, something that powerful people had spent 40 years keeping buried. The medical examination came on week 6. Routine screening, height, weight, blood pressure, general fitness, the kind of bureaucratic necessity that military organizations used to justify their existence. Elena stripped to regulation athletic wear in the examination room. Sports bra, shorts, enough exposed skin to reveal the geography of her past. The Navy corpsman conducting the exam was professional, efficient, unbothered by the human form in front of him. He noted the scars, made clinical observations about old injuries. Then he saw the tattoo. Upper left shoulder, 4 inches square, dark ink, professionally done, expensive work. A Delta Force insignia, the distinctive spearhead design. Below it, numbers, a unit designation. The corpsman's pen stopped moving. Ma'am, I need to note this tattoo for the record. When did you get this? 18th birthday. The design is specific, military unit insignia. You understand that unauthorized wear of military symbols is... It was my father's unit. I got it as a memorial. The corpsman looked at her file, saw the KIA notation, nodded slowly. I see. I'll note it as memorial artwork, but ma'am, I have to tell you that unit designation, some people might have questions. My father earned that patch. He died wearing it. I wear it to honor his memory. Anyone has a problem with that, they can discuss it with me personally. The corpsman raised his hands, backing off. Understood, ma'am. Just doing my job. But when she left, he made a phone call to his supervisor, who made a phone call to security, who made a phone call to Harrison, who already knew about the tattoo, had known since week 1 because he made it his business to know everything about his recruits. But seeing it confirmed, documented in official medical records, changed the equation. Because that unit designation didn't exist, officially. It had been scrubbed from records after Operation Nightfall collapsed in 1985. After Robert Reeves disappeared into Soviet territory, carrying secrets that could have destroyed careers, ended lives, rewritten history. And now his daughter wore the proof on her skin. Harrison pulled the file from his desk, the one he'd been building. Photographs, notes, questions without answers. He added the medical report to the stack. Then he locked the file in his safe, the one that required 2 keys and a combination only he knew. Because some truths needed protection. From the world, from the people who might kill to keep them hidden, and from the young woman who might die seeking them. Outside his window, the California sun began its descent toward the Pacific. Shadows lengthened across the training grounds. In those shadows, Elena Reeves ran laps, pushing her body past failure, running from or towards something Harrison couldn't quite determine. He'd seen that look before, on her father's face. In the weeks before Operation Nightfall, before everything went wrong, before Robert Reeves walked into darkness and never came back. History, Harrison thought, had a terrible habit of repeating itself, and he was beginning to suspect that Elena Reeves was about to force that repetition, whether she knew it or not, whether she survived it or not. The question wasn't if the past would catch up to her. The question was, who would get there first? Harrison, trying to protect her from truths she might not survive, or the people who'd buried those truths 40 years ago, who would do anything to keep them buried, even if it meant burying Robert Reeves' daughter alongside them. The knock came at 0200 hours. 3 sharp raps against metal that cut through the darkness like gunfire. Elena woke instantly, completely, the kind of waking that suggested she'd never been fully asleep. Harrison stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the dim hallway lights. His uniform was crisp despite the hour. Eyes carried the weight of decisions already made. Get dressed. Utilities, not PT gear. Meet me at Building 7 in 10 minutes. Come alone. He didn't wait for acknowledgement. Didn't need to. This wasn't a request. Elena dressed in silence. Around her, other recruits slept the exhausted sleep of bodies pushed past ordinary limits. Nina stirred, but didn't wake. Marcus snored like a chainsaw hitting oak. Tyler mumbled something about his mother. Building 7 sat at the edge of the compound. Concrete block construction from the Cold War era, windows thick enough to stop small arms fire. The kind of building that had been designed for briefings that couldn't happen anywhere else. Harrison waited inside. The room was small, windowless, soundproofed. A table, 2 chairs, a laptop computer that looked expensive and encrypted. On the table sat a file folder, thick enough to contain either complete truth or elaborate lies. Sit down, Elena. First time he'd used her first name. The informality felt like a weapon being drawn. She sat, kept her hands visible on the table, waited. Harrison opened the file, slid a photograph across the table. Black and white, grainy, 2 men in desert camouflage, faces painted, weapons that looked custom and deadly. Afghanistan, based on the terrain. 1980s, based on the equipment. You recognize either of these men? Elena studied the photo. Her heart rate didn't change. Her breathing stayed controlled, but her eyes stopped moving when they found the man on the left. Younger, harder, but the same bone structure, the same way of standing that suggested coiled violence barely contained. My father. And the man next to him? She looked at Harrison, at the photograph, back to Harrison. Understanding dawned slowly, like blood spreading through water. You. Harrison nodded. Afghanistan, 1984. We were hunting Soviets who were hunting Mujahideen commanders. Off-book operation. No records, no oversight, no backup if things went wrong. Your father and I spent 7 months in those mountains, living like ghosts. He pulled out another photograph. This one showed a safe house, crude furniture, maps spread across tables. 5 men, all Delta, all looking like they'd forgotten what civilization felt like. We were brothers, closer than blood, the kind of bond you only forge when you're the only thing standing between each other and death. Harrison's voice carried textures of memory, edges of grief. Robert Reeves was the finest soldier I ever served with, and the best friend I ever had. Elena's hands had moved from the table to her lap, hiding the tremor that was trying to start. What happened to him? Harrison closed the file, stood, walked to the wall where a map of Afghanistan hung, old creases suggesting it had been folded and unfolded countless times. The official story? He was killed during a classified operation in 1985, died serving his country. Name on a wall somewhere, honors rendered, case closed. And the unofficial story? The true story. Harrison turned. His face had aged 10 years in 10 seconds. Your father didn't die in 1985. He was hunting a traitor, someone inside the CIA who was selling operational intelligence to the Soviets, getting our people killed, compromising missions. He called it Operation Nightfall. Elena felt the floor shift beneath her. The journal, the coded entries, the coordinates and names that had made no sense. You knew about the journal. Not a question. Harrison's expression confirmed it. I knew Robert kept operational notes. Knew he didn't trust the official channels. Smart man. The day before he disappeared, he told me that if anything happened to him, I should look for documentation. Insurance, he called it. Harrison returned to the table, opened the laptop, pulled up scanned documents, CIA cables, operational summaries, after-action reports, all marked with classification levels that meant they shouldn't exist outside of secured government facilities. Operation Nightfall was supposed to be a meet with a Soviet defector, someone claiming to have information about the mole. Your father went in alone, against protocol, because he didn't know who he could trust. The laptop screen showed a map of the Soviet-Afghan border. A small red X marked a location in the mountains. He never came back from that meeting. The Soviets claimed they'd killed an American spy attempting to infiltrate their territory. We had no body, no confirmation, nothing but radio silence. Harrison's finger traced the border on the screen. Command ordered me to stand down, told me Robert had gone rogue, that he was unstable, that any rescue attempt would be suicide and unauthorized. But you didn't believe them. I knew Robert, knew he'd never go rogue. So I went looking. Spent 3 weeks in those mountains, following every lead, bribing every warlord, threatening every Soviet officer I could find. Harrison pulled up another document, a Soviet military police report translated into English, dated December 1985. I found this in a filing cabinet in Kabul, 6 years later, after the Soviets pulled out. Prisoner transfer document. One American male, unidentified, severely injured, transferred from field detention to Lubyanka prison in Moscow for interrogation. Elena read the document. The description matched her father. Height, weight, approximate age. Distinguishing marks including a Delta Force tattoo on the left forearm. He was alive. Was, Harrison emphasized the past tense. That report is dated December 85. After that, nothing. No other transfers, no interrogation transcripts, no execution records. Robert Reeves entered the Soviet prison system and vanished. The room felt smaller, colder. Elena's mind raced through implications, possibilities, the mathematics of hope and loss. Why didn't you tell anyone? Why didn't the government? Because someone in our government wanted him to disappear. Harrison's voice carried an edge that could cut glass. The same someone he was hunting, the mole, Winter Wolf. Elena's head snapped up. How do you know that name? Because your father told me, the night before he went to that meeting. He said if anything happened to him, I should remember 2 things. Winter Wolf was real, and Winter Wolf had enough power to bury anyone who got too close. Harrison pulled out one more photograph. Recent, color. A man in his 80s, distinguished, wearing an expensive suit, speaking at what looked like a Washington think tank event. Admiral David Mercer, retired, former deputy director of the CIA. In 1985, he was running covert operations in Southwest Asia. He had oversight on everything we did, including Operation Nightfall. Elena studied the face. Aristocratic features, silver hair, eyes that suggested intelligence and ruthlessness in equal measure. And you think he's Winter Wolf? I know he is. Harrison tapped the photograph. Your father was closing in on proof. That's why Mercer sent him into that trap. That's why he ordered me to stand down. That's why Robert Reeves officially died in action instead of being listed as captured. Because if he was captured, there'd have to be rescue attempts, investigations, attention Mercer couldn't afford. Exactly. Elena stood, paced the small room. Energy needed an outlet before it exploded. So my father spent 40 years in a Soviet prison because someone in our government betrayed him. And you've known this how long? I've suspected for 39 years. I've known for certain for about 3. Harrison's voice carried the weight of decades. I couldn't prove it. Mercer's protected, connected to everyone who matters. Any accusation without ironclad evidence would end my career and probably my life. What changed 3 years ago? Harrison hesitated. The kind of hesitation that suggested he was about to cross a line he couldn't uncross. I received a letter, unsigned, postmarked from Vienna. Inside was a single page, your father's handwriting, a message that said, still breathing, Winter Wolf still hunting. Tell my daughter I'm sorry. The room spun. Elena's hand found the table, gripped it hard enough to hurt. He's alive. My father's alive. The letter was 3 years old when I got it. Whoever sent it probably did so after your father died. A final wish. Or maybe he's still alive, somewhere in Russia, surviving on whatever kept him alive this long. Harrison's hand covered hers on the table. Gentle. The touch of a man who understood grief. I tried to find you, but your mother had changed her name, moved 6 times in 10 years. She was hiding. From what, I never knew. By the time I tracked you down, she died. Cancer. I'm sorry. Elena pulled her hand away, not in rejection, but in need of space to process information that was reshaping her entire understanding of reality. The journal. My mother left it for me. Coded entries, coordinates, names. I couldn't make sense of most of it. Because you didn't have the cipher, Robert used a book code. Unless you knew which book, the entries are meaningless. Harrison pulled a slim volume from inside his jacket. Old, worn, pages stained with use and climate. Hemingway, For Whom the Bell Tolls, first edition, Robert's favorite. He carried it through 3 wars. He set it on the table between them. The coordinates in his journal correspond to dead drops, places he hid evidence before Operation Nightfall, information about Winter Wolf's identity, his operations, his betrayals. Robert knew if he didn't make it back, someone would eventually piece together the truth. How many dead drops? 3 that I know of, could be more. The journal entries stop abruptly in April 1985. Whatever he found after that, he never had time to document. Elena picked up the Hemingway, felt its weight. 40 years of secrets, encoded in a novel about war and sacrifice, and loving things enough to let them destroy you. Where's the first drop? Nevada, desert site near where we used to run training exercises. Abandoned Cold War bunker, scheduled for demolition in 6 months. If we're going to retrieve it, we need to move soon. We? Harrison's smile was grim. You think I'm letting Robert's daughter walk into this alone? I failed him once. I won't fail you. Elena sat back down, looked at the photograph of her father and Harrison. Young men, immortal in that moment, believing they'd always have each other's backs. One of them had been wrong. Why now? Why tell me this now? Because 3 days ago, someone accessed your personnel file. Someone with high-level clearance who shouldn't have any reason to be interested in a random recruit. Harrison pulled up a computer log on his laptop. And because yesterday, base security cameras caught this. The image showed the perimeter fence. A man, 60s or older, photographing the base through a telephoto lens. The resolution was poor, but the face was visible enough. Elena leaned closer, studied the features. felt something cold settle in her chest. Who is he? Sergei Volkov, colonel, retired, former KGB. In the 1980s, he ran counterintelligence operations against American forces in Afghanistan. He's the one who captured your father, the one who tortured him for information, the one who supposedly killed him. Harrison zoomed in on Volkov's face. Age had carved it into something harder, colder. 2 days ago, he was in Moscow. Now he's here, in California, watching this base, watching you. That's not coincidence. That's purpose. Elena felt pieces clicking together. The journal, the tattoo, her enlistment, her presence here. Someone told him about me. Someone who knew about the journal, about what my father left behind. Someone who's afraid that after 40 years, the truth is finally going to surface, and they're willing to kill to keep it buried. The laptop screen showed Volkov walking away from the fence, moving with the careful precision of a man who'd spent a lifetime being the hunter, not the hunted. So what do we do? Harrison closed the laptop, looked at Elena with eyes that had seen too much death and were preparing to see more. We do what your father would do. We finish the mission. We retrieve the evidence from those dead drops. We expose Winterwolf. We bring down everyone who betrayed Robert Reeves and left him to rot in a Soviet prison. And Volkov? Volkov's been hunting your father for 40 years. Now he'll be hunting you. We need to be ready for that. Ready to do what soldiers do when the enemy finds them. Which is? Harrison's expression held no illusions. We fight, we survive, or we die trying, just like your father taught us. The briefing ended with dawn breaking over Camp Pendleton. Elena walked back to the barracks through morning light that felt unreal, surreal, like she'd crossed into a different world where everything she'd believed was subject to revision. Nina was awake when Elena entered, doing push-ups. She stopped when she saw Elena's face. You okay? You look like you saw a ghost. Elena sat on her bunk, stared at hands that wanted to shake but wouldn't be allowed to. Maybe I did. Training that day passed in a blur. Obstacle course, hand-to-hand combat drills, classroom instruction on small unit tactics. Elena moved through it mechanically, her mind elsewhere. Calculating, planning, understanding that her life had just become exponentially more complicated and dangerous. Marcus noticed during the lunch break, sat down across from her in the mess hall with a tray loaded with enough calories to fuel a small army. You're quiet today, more than usual. Something wrong? Just tired. Bull, I've seen tired. You're somewhere else, somewhere bad. He leaned in, lowered his voice. Look, I know we're not exactly friends, but we're in the same platoon. That means something. So if you need backup, whatever's going on, you say the word. Elena looked at him, really looked, past the bravado and the muscles and the easy confidence. Saw something genuine underneath. Loyalty. The kind that maybe meant something when everything went to hell. I appreciate that, really, but this is something I need to handle carefully. Famous last words of every soldier who ended up needing a medevac. He had a point, but bringing others into this meant putting them in danger. Danger from people who'd proven they were willing to kill to protect secrets. That evening, Harrison called her to his office, handed her a burner phone. One number programmed in, mine. You see anything suspicious, anyone following you, anything that feels wrong, you call. Don't wait. Don't try to handle it alone. You think they'll move that fast? I think they've had 40 years to perfect how they handle threats. And I think you just became a threat the moment you enlisted. The tattoo, the name, the timing. Too many coincidences. Someone's been watching you, waiting to see what you do. Elena pocketed the phone. The dead drop. When do we go? This weekend. There's a training exercise scheduled off base. I'll arrange for you to have equipment malfunction, separate from your unit. We'll have 6 hours, maybe 8, before anyone notices you're missing. And if Volkov's watching, then we'll find out just how good your father's training was. The week crawled past. Elena maintained her cover, her performance, her careful mediocrity. But at night, alone in her bunk, she studied the journal, used the Hemingway cipher Harrison had given her, decoded entries that read like accusations from beyond the grave. Winterwolf knows about the Lebanon operation. 3 good men dead because of his intelligence leak. Winterwolf meeting with Soviet contact, Vienna, March 1984. Photographed from distance. Negative secured in drop site Nevada 1. Evidence perfect for a desert training exercise that would take them miles from observation. Elena's unit loaded into trucks at 0600. Harrison had arranged for her to carry communications equipment that would, predictably, malfunction 30 miles into the exercise. Standard procedure was to return to base for replacement. Standard procedure would be ignored. The malfunction happened on schedule. Harrison, acting as observer for the exercise, ordered Elena to return to base with one other person for safety. That person was Nina, who'd volunteered before anyone else could. "I'll go with her. Better than humping another 20 miles in this heat." Marcus looked disappointed. Tyler relieved. The rest of the unit barely noticed. Sergeant Kane, overseeing the exercise, gave Harrison a questioning look but said nothing. He'd learned long ago that colonels had their reasons. The truck dropped them at a crossroads. Harrison waited in a civilian vehicle, parked half a mile down a dirt road that looked abandoned. "Change of plans," he said when they climbed in. "Nina, I need you to trust me when I say that what we're about to do is important, dangerous, and completely off book. You can stay with the vehicle, no questions asked, or you can come with us. But if you come, you're all in. No halfway." Nina looked at Elena, at Harrison, at the desert stretching in all directions. "Does this have something to do with why Reeves has been wound tight as a spring for 2 weeks?" "Yes. And it's important enough that a full-bird colonel is risking his career?" "Yes." Nina nodded. "Then I'm in, but someone better explain what the hell we're doing before we get there." They drove. Harrison laid out the basics. Robert Reeves, Winterwolf, the dead drop. Enough truth to explain the mission without revealing details that could get Nina killed. She listened, processed, asked the kind of intelligent questions that suggested she was evaluating risk versus reward. "So we're basically committing treason by accessing classified material without authorization." "Technically, yes. And if we get caught, we're all going to military prison. Most likely, and the people we're going up against have already proven they're willing to kill to protect their secrets." "Definitely." Nina sat back, looked out the window at landscape that hadn't changed much since the Pleistocene. "Well, at least it's not boring." The bunker sat at the base of a ridgeline, camouflaged so well that even knowing it was there, it took 20 minutes to find the entrance. Concrete and steel, built during an era when nuclear war seemed inevitable and survival seemed possible if you just dug deep enough. The door had been sealed with a chain and padlock. Harrison produced bolt cutters. The chain fell away like the decades it had been holding. Inside smelled like dust and decay and forgotten purposes. Their flashlights cut through darkness that felt absolute. Rooms appeared in the light. Bunks, storage, a command center with equipment so old it belonged in museums. Robert said the drop was in the communications room, behind a panel in the floor. They found the room, found the panel. It took all 3 of them to pry it open. Beneath, wrapped in waterproof material that had survived 40 years of desert climate, sat a metal container. Elena lifted it out, felt its weight. 40 years of truth, compressed into something she could carry. Harrison's hand on her shoulder. "Whatever's in there, we look at it together. Your father trusted me with this. I won't let you face it alone." She opened the container. Inside, photographs, documents, cassette tapes labeled with dates and locations, a handwritten note in her father's precise script. "To whoever finds this, the photographs show Winterwolf meeting with KGB Colonel Volkov in Vienna, 1984. The documents prove he's been passing classified information for at least 3 years. The tapes contain recordings of conversations that implicate him in the deaths of at least 7 American intelligence operatives. His name is David Mercer, current Deputy Director, CIA. He cannot be touched through normal channels. He has too much power, too many allies. If you're reading this, I'm probably dead. But the truth isn't. Use it. Expose him. Make sure good men stop dying for his greed. And if my daughter ever reads this, Elena, I'm sorry. Sorry I wasn't there. Sorry you're carrying this burden. But you're strong. Stronger than you know. You have your mother's heart and your father's stubbornness. That's a dangerous combination. Finish what I started. Not for revenge, for justice. I love you. I always have, even from the grave. Dad. Elena's hands trembled. The emotion she'd been holding back for weeks finally found its release. Tears came, silent and hot, falling onto photographs of her father with Harrison. Both of them young and alive, and believing the world made sense. Nina turned away, gave her privacy. Harrison simply waited, present but not intrusive. When Elena could speak again, her voice came out raw. He knew. He knew they'd kill him, and he went anyway. Because that's what soldiers do. We go into the dark so others don't have to. They photographed everything, uploaded copies to encrypted servers Harrison had access to, took the original materials, sealed the container back in his hiding place in case they needed to prove they hadn't fabricated evidence. The drive back was silent, each of them processing what they'd found, what it meant, what came next. They were 15 miles from base when Harrison's phone rang. Secure line. He answered, listened, his face going rigid. When? How many? Pause. Understood, we're 20 minutes out. He ended the call, looked at Elena in the rearview mirror. That was base security. There's been an incident. Someone tried to access your barracks room, bypassed the lock, got inside, tore the place apart looking for something. The journal. Most likely, they fled when another recruit came back early. But Elena, here's the thing. The recruit who interrupted them? Tyler. He tried to stop whoever it was. They put a knife in his side. He's in surgery now. Touch and go. The world went red at the edges. Tyler. 19 years old. Kid who should have been in college, not bleeding out because he'd stumbled into someone else's war. Did they catch who did it? No, but security cameras caught enough for an ID. Carlos Vega. Transferred into your platoon 2 weeks ago. Records say he's from San Diego, clean background, exemplary service record. But the CIA has no record of running his background check, even though regulations require it for special operations candidates, which means someone with enough power to bypass security protocols placed him in your unit. Nina's voice from the back seat, quiet and deadly. We have a mole. Inside the base. Someone working for whoever's trying to bury this. Harrison nodded. And they just proved they're willing to kill. Not just your father 40 years ago, but a 19-year-old kid today. Elena felt something crystallize inside her. Something cold and hard and absolutely certain. Then we don't wait for them to come at us again. We go on offense. We use what we found. We force Mercer into the open. We end this. Elena, these people have spent 40 years perfecting how they eliminate threats. We need to be smart about. They put a knife in Tyler because he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. They tortured my father in a Soviet prison for information he'd never give up. They've killed how many others? 7 that we know of. Probably more. She leaned forward, met Harrison's eyes in the mirror. You said my father taught you that when the enemy finds you, you fight. Well, they found us, so we fight. We use every piece of evidence. We go public. We burn Mercer's whole world down. Harrison drove in silence for a mile, then nodded. Okay, but we do it smart. We do it right. We make sure when we pull the trigger, the shot counts, because we'll only get one chance. They reached base to find it on lockdown, Military police everywhere, helicopters overhead. The kind of response that suggested whoever had planted Carlos Vega had badly underestimated how seriously the military took attacks on its personnel. Tyler survived surgery, barely. The knife had missed his liver by half an inch. He'd be in recovery for weeks, but he'd live. Elena visited him in the hospital, sat beside a bed where tubes and monitors kept a kid alive who should have been worrying about exams and girls and whether his car would make it through another year. "I'm sorry," she said. Meant it more than she'd meant anything in her life. Tyler's eyes open, morphine clouded but aware. "Not your fault. Guy was looking for something, in your stuff." "I know. You shouldn't have tried to stop him." "Marine Corps doesn't teach quitting." A weak smile. "Besides, you've had my back since day one. Time I return the favor. Rest, heal. This isn't over, but you've done enough. Hell with that. Soon as I'm mobile, I'm back in. We're a team. Teams don't leave people behind." Elena left before emotion overwhelmed her again. Found Harrison in the hallway with a man she didn't recognize. 60s, civilian clothes, eyes that suggested he'd seen and done things that would make normal people wake up screaming. "Elena, this is James Sullivan, former CIA. He worked with your father in the 80s. He's one of the few people from that era I still trust." Sullivan extended a hand. His grip was firm, testing. "Robert saved my life in Beirut. Took a bullet meant for me. I've spent 30 years wishing I could return the favor. Maybe now I can." "What do you know about Winterwolf?" "Enough to confirm everything Harrison told you, and enough to know that David Mercer has been untouchable for 40 years because he's careful, connected, and willing to do whatever it takes to protect himself." "So how do we take him down?" Sullivan's smile wasn't pleasant. "We give him exactly what he wants. We make him think he's won, and then we spring the trap." They moved to a secure conference room, spread out the evidence, photographs, documents, tapes, built a case that would destroy careers, end lives, rewrite history. "The problem," Sullivan explained, "is that Mercer has friends in very high places. If we go through normal channels, he'll know before we file the first report. He'll activate countermeasures, discredit us, make everything disappear. So we go public. Media, internet, blast it everywhere at once, which makes us look like conspiracy theorists unless we have corroboration. We need someone with credibility, someone whose reputation is beyond question." Harrison leaned back, thinking. Then his eyes widened slightly. "General Patricia Morrison, retired, former head of Defense Intelligence Agency. She worked with Robert in the 80s, tried to investigate his disappearance, got stonewalled by Mercer's people. She's been waiting 40 years for proof. Will she help? If we bring her evidence this solid, she'll do more than help. She'll turn it into a crusade." They spent the next 3 days building an airtight case, verification, cross-referencing, making sure every photograph, every document, every recording could be authenticated. Nina proved invaluable. Her signals intelligence background let them enhance photographs, clean up audio recordings, trace communication patterns that proved Mercer had been in Vienna at exactly the moments the photographs showed him meeting with Volkov. Marcus, when they finally brought him into the circle, contributed muscle and tactical thinking, planning security, thinking through how Mercer might respond, preparing for violence that seemed increasingly inevitable. On the 4th day, Harrison received a message. General Morrison would meet them, but not at her home, not in Washington, somewhere neutral, somewhere she could verify their evidence without interference. Arlington National Cemetery, the Vietnam Memorial. Among the names of the dead, they discussed the living traitor who'd sent too many of those names to their deaths. The meeting was set for Sunday, 1400 hours. 2 days away, they prepared, copied evidence onto multiple drives, distributed them to trusted sources with instructions to release everything, if they didn't check in within 24 hours. Created a dead man's switch of their own. Elena spent Saturday night reading her father's journal one more time. The decoded entries painted a picture of a man who'd seen the worst of humanity and still believed in doing the right thing, who'd sacrificed everything for truth, even though he knew it would probably kill him. The last entry, dated April 15th, 1985, read, "Tomorrow I meet the defector. Volkov's lieutenant, supposedly, claims to have evidence that Winterwolf is planning something big, something that will get a lot of people killed. I don't trust it. Feels like a trap. But if there's even a chance it's real, I have to go. That's the job. That's the oath. If this goes wrong, if I don't make it back, I need whoever finds this to know. I regret nothing. Every choice I made because it was right. Not easy, right. Tell Elena her father loved her. Tell her she was the reason I fought so hard to make the world better. Tell her she's stronger than she knows, braver than she believes, and more capable than anyone will ever give her credit for. Tell her to be the person I saw in her eyes the last time I held her, the person who doesn't quit, who doesn't back down, who faces the dark because someone has to. Tell her I'm proud of her, even if I never got to say it." Elena closed the journal, felt its weight. 40 years of silence broken by a daughter who'd inherited her father's stubbornness and his unwillingness to let injustice stand. Tomorrow, at Arlington, among the honored dead, they'd begin the process of bringing a living traitor to justice. And if Mercer tried to stop them, then Elena would prove she was indeed Robert Reeves's daughter. In every way that mattered. The flight from San Diego to Washington took 6 hours. Elena spent it memorizing faces from the photographs. Mercer, young and ambitious in 1984 Vienna, meeting with Volkov in cafes where spies had traded secrets since the Cold War turned hot. The same Mercer, older now, speaking at think tanks and defense conferences, wearing respectability like armor. Harrison sat across the aisle, reviewing tactical plans with the focus of a man who'd survived 3 wars by never assuming anything. Nina worked a laptop, her fingers dancing across keys, building digital redundancies and failsafes. Marcus slept, or pretended to, conserving energy the way soldiers learned to do before operations went kinetic. They'd left Tyler recovering at Camp Pendleton, guarded by military police who'd been read into enough of the situation to understand that someone had tried to kill a recruit on American soil. The base commander, a 2-star general who'd served under Harrison in Iraq, had asked no questions, simply provided resources and plausible deniability. The good old boy network, Harrison had called it, the brotherhood of people who'd bled together and trusted that bond more than paperwork. Sullivan met them at Reagan National. He'd driven up from Langley in a vehicle that looked civilian, but had government plates that weren't quite right. The kind of subtle tell that suggested whoever was watching would know exactly who was coming and why. General Morrison confirmed for 1400 hours. Vietnam Memorial, South End. She'll have 2 former DIA analysts with her, both retired, both with clearances high enough to verify what we're showing her. Sullivan handed Harrison a small device that looked like a car key fob. Signal jammer. Short range, but it'll keep anyone from listening in electronically. The cemetery has good sight lines, though. If someone wants to observe from distance, they can. Let them observe. Elena's voice carried edges it hadn't possessed 6 weeks ago. Let them see we're not backing down. They checked into a hotel in Arlington. Separate rooms but adjoining, with sightlines covering the hallway. Harrison posted Marcus on first watch, while the rest of them tried to sleep. Elena lay in darkness, staring at a ceiling she couldn't see, thinking about her father. Trying to imagine what he'd felt the night before he walked into that trap in Afghanistan. Whether he'd been afraid, whether he'd known he wasn't coming back. The journal suggested he'd known, had accepted it, had gone anyway because that's what soldiers did when the mission mattered more than the man. She understood that now. Understood it in ways she couldn't have 6 weeks ago, before boot camp had stripped away civilian softness and revealed something harder underneath. Something that had always been there, inherited from a father she'd never known, but had somehow always carried inside her. Sleep came eventually, shallow and haunted by dreams of desert mountains, in prison cells, and a man with her eyes, dying alone in darkness, while his country forgot he existed. Sunday morning arrived with weather that felt like an omen. Gray skies, temperatures dropping, wind carrying the smell of coming rain. They dressed carefully, business casual, nothing that would draw attention in a cemetery full of tourists and families honoring their dead. Elena wore a jacket that concealed the Glock 19 Harrison had given her. 15 rounds, one in the chamber, 2 spare magazines. More firepower than she should need in a national cemetery. Probably not enough if Mercer decided to move against them violently. They arrived at Arlington 2 hours early, walked the grounds, identifying sight lines and exit routes. The cemetery sprawled across 600 acres, containing 400,000 graves. Heroes and legends resting in rows that stretched toward horizons, marked by monuments to sacrifice. The Vietnam Memorial cut into a hillside like a wound that had never quite healed. Black granite panels bearing 58,000 names of men and women who died in a war that America had tried to forget but couldn't quite manage. Harrison stopped at one panel, touched a name. His finger traced letters carved into stone. Jimmy Morrison, General Morrison's son, helicopter pilot, shot down during the evacuation of Saigon, April 1975. She was a colonel then, stationed in Germany, couldn't even attend his funeral. His voice carried textures of old grief. That's why she'll help, because she knows what it's like to lose someone to a war that didn't have to happen. Elena found herself searching the panels, looking for her father's name. It wasn't there. He disappeared after Vietnam ended, officially killed in a classified operation that had no memorial, no recognition, no acknowledgement beyond a file buried in some CIA basement. The forgotten dead. The ones who'd sacrificed everything and received nothing but silence in return. At 13:45 hours, General Patricia Morrison arrived. 74 years old, but carrying those years like a weapon she'd learned to use effectively. Ramrod straight posture, silver hair cut military short, eyes that had commanded intelligence agencies and stared down Pentagon generals without flinching. She wore a simple black coat over a white blouse, no jewelry except a wedding ring worn thin by decades. Behind her came 2 men, both 60s, both with the careful awareness of people who'd spent careers in the intelligence community. They positioned themselves at angles that gave clear views of approaches while maintaining conversational distance. Harrison saluted. The general returned it crisply. "Colonel Harrison, it's been too long." "General Morrison, thank you for meeting us." Her eyes moved to Elena, studied her with the intensity of someone reading classified documents. "You're Robert Reeves's daughter." "I see it. Same bone structure. Same way of standing that suggests you're ready for violence, but hoping to avoid it." She extended a hand. "Your father was one of the finest intelligence operatives I ever worked with. His disappearance was one of the great failures of my career. I tried to find him, tried to get authorization for rescue operations. I was blocked at every level. By Mercer, among others, but yes, primarily Mercer. He had the authority to classify everything related to Operation Nightfall so deeply that even people with my clearance couldn't access it." Morrison's jaw tightened. "I knew something was wrong. Knew Robert wouldn't go rogue, but I couldn't prove it. After a year of hitting walls, I gave up. That failure has haunted me for 40 years. Harrison handed her a tablet computer. "Then maybe today we can finally give you closure." For the next 30 minutes, Morrison and her analysts reviewed the evidence. Photographs that placed Mercer in Vienna during meetings with known KGB operatives. Documents proving he'd redirected intelligence reports, altered operational summaries, buried evidence of Soviet penetration of American intelligence networks. Audio recordings of conversations where Mercer discussed payment for services rendered, operational security, the elimination of threats to his position. Morrison's face remained neutral throughout, but her hands gripped the tablet hard enough that her knuckles went white. When she finished, she looked up. Her eyes had gone cold in ways that suggested what she was feeling couldn't be safely expressed in a public cemetery. This is actionable. This will destroy him. Not just his reputation. This is conspiracy, treason, accessory to murder of federal agents. If we can authenticate these materials, Mercer will spend whatever remains of his life in a maximum security federal prison. Can you authenticate them? Elena asked. My analysts will need 48 hours. Full forensic examination, chain of custody verification, expert analysis. But based on preliminary review, yes, this looks legitimate. These photographs match other intelligence we have from that era. The documents use correct formatting, classification markings, terminology. The audio will need voice analysis, but the content matches known operations. She handed the tablet back to Harrison. Here's what happens next. You give me copies of everything. I take this to the current director of the CIA, who happens to be a former student of mine and someone I trust absolutely. We brief the Attorney General. We build a prosecution so airtight that Mercer can't use his connections to escape. And then we arrest him. How long? Harrison's voice carried urgency. We have 2 days where Mercer could destroy evidence, eliminate witnesses, disappear into the networks he'd built over 40 years. General, with respect, my father waited 40 years for justice. People died because we weren't fast enough. If we give Mercer 2 days, he'll use them. He's survived this long by being smarter than everyone chasing him. Morrison's expression softened slightly. I know you want immediate action. I understand that impulse. But we do this right, or we don't do it at all. Robert Reeves deserves justice, not revenge that falls apart in court. Sullivan stepped forward. General, there's another factor. We've identified at least one asset Mercer placed inside Camp Pendleton, Carlos Vega. He tried to recover Robert's journal, put a knife in a recruit who interrupted him. He's been detained, but he's not talking. Professional, trained, the kind of operative who knows how to wait out interrogation, which suggests Mercer has other assets we haven't identified yet. Exactly. Morrison considered this. Behind her, tourists moved through the memorial, touching names, leaving flowers, communing with ghosts. An old man in a wheelchair, wearing a Vietnam veteran cap, wept silently. His grandson stood beside him, hand on his shoulder, sharing grief that transcended generations. All right, here's the compromise. I'll have my analysts work around the clock. 48 hours, no more. But in exchange, you all go to ground. No hotels, no public appearances. I'll arrange a safe house in Virginia. You stay there until we're ready to move. Harrison looked at Elena. She nodded. Agreed. But General, one request. When you arrest Mercer, I want to be there. I want him to see Robert Reeves's daughter. I want him to know who brought him down. Morrison studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. When we move, I'll make sure you're notified. You've earned that much. They transferred the evidence. Multiple encrypted drives, handed over with chain of custody documentation that would hold up in federal court. Morrison's analysts departed immediately, carrying 40 years of secrets toward laboratories that would either confirm their authenticity or reveal them as elaborate forgeries. As Morrison prepared to leave, she turned back to Elena. Your father once told me something I've never forgotten. We were in Lebanon, 1983, right after the barracks bombing. He died fighting for truth. That matters. That will always matter. Morrison left. Her security detail formed up around her, and they disappeared into the cemetery like ghosts returning to their proper haunting grounds. Sullivan drove them to the safe house, 40 minutes outside Arlington, in rural Virginia, where farms gave way to forest, and the only neighbors were deer and conspiracy theorists who'd chosen isolation over society. The house sat at the end of a gravel road, surrounded by trees that hadn't been cleared because someone had valued privacy over views. Inside looked like every government safe house ever built. Functional furniture, no personality, walls thick enough to stop rifle rounds, windows with ballistic film. A panic room in the basement with supplies for 2 weeks and communications equipment that could reach satellite phones anywhere on Earth. Home sweet home. Sullivan activated the security system. Cameras covered every approach. Motion sensors ringed the property. Anyone trying to reach the house would be detected long before they arrived. I'll be staying in the cottage out back. Former Secret Service, good with a rifle, better with paranoia. You're as safe here as anywhere. They settled in. Marcus took first watch, positioned on the second floor where he could see the access road. Nina, she'd appeared silently, moving with the careful steps of someone who understood that Elena might need space or might need company. Defining okay is getting harder. Yeah, that happens when you discover your whole life was built on lies. Nina poured herself coffee, added enough sugar to qualify as dessert. For what it's worth, your dad sounds like he was a good man. Doesn't make up for him not being there, but it means something that he was trying to make the world better. He was trying to expose a traitor and got tortured in a Soviet prison for 40 years. That's not better. That's tragedy pretending to be heroism. Maybe, or maybe it's heroism that looks like tragedy because he didn't get to see how the story ended. Nina sipped her coffee, made a face. This tastes like regret and poor decisions. Despite everything, Elena smiled. That's what government coffee always tastes like. They sat in comfortable silence. Outside, evening settled over Virginia countryside. Birds called their final songs before darkness. Wind moved through trees with sounds that could be mistaken for voices if you listened wrong. Harrison joined them. He looked older in the kitchen light, years catching up with him, or maybe just the weight of carrying other people's secrets for so long. When this is over, when Mercer's arrested and the truth comes out, what are you going to do? He asked Elena. What does that make me if I follow the same path? Harrison set down his coffee, leaned back. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of decades. I've been a soldier for 42 years, seen things I'll never talk about, done things I'll never admit to. I've killed people who probably deserved it, and maybe some who didn't. I've followed orders I disagreed with and disobeyed orders I knew were wrong. And through all of it, I've tried to remember one thing. He looked at her directly. We don't serve governments. We serve ideals. Freedom, justice, truth. When the government aligns with those ideals, we follow. When it doesn't, we push back. Your father understood that. He pushed back. It cost him everything, but he was right to do it. And if pushing back cost me everything too, then you'll know you lived for something that mattered. Most people never get that certainty. The conversation ended there. They moved to different parts of the house, maintaining watch rotations, waiting for authentication that might never come, or might arrive with news that the evidence was fake, fabricated, useless. Elena slept in brief intervals. Dreams came, but they changed. Instead of her father dying in darkness, she dreamed of him surviving, escaping, living in shadows for decades, watching from distance as his daughter grew up, unable to return because the threat he'd uncovered was still hunting him. She woke at 0300 to sounds that didn't belong. Footsteps on gravel, careful, measured, multiple people moving with tactical precision. Her hand found the Glock. She rolled out of bed, moved to the window, staying below sightline. Outside, nothing visible, but the motion sensors should have triggered. The fact that they hadn't meant someone had disabled them. She keyed the radio Harrison had given her. We've got company, multiple contacts, sensors are down. Harrison's voice came back immediately, calm and controlled. Copy. Everyone to the panic room, now. Elena moved into the hallway, Found Marcus already there, rifle in hand, eyes scanning doorways. Nina emerged from her room, laptop under one arm, pistol in the other hand. They moved as a unit toward the basement stairs, training kicking in. No panic, just execution. The front door exploded inward, not kicked, breached with explosives. Professional entry, the kind special operations use when speed mattered more than subtlety. 4 men poured through, tactical gear, suppressed weapons, night vision. They moved like a unit that had trained together extensively. Marcus fired first. 3 rounds center mass. The lead man went down hard. The others scattered, seeking cover, returning fire with discipline that suggested military training. Harrison appeared at the top of the basement stairs. "Move! I'll cover." They ran. Elena last, turning to provide covering fire. She'd trained for this in countless exercises, but training didn't capture the reality of bullets snapping past, of adrenaline turning time elastic, of the absolute clarity that came with knowing death was present and hunting. She fired twice, saw one attacker stumble, couldn't tell if she'd hit him or if he'd tripped. Didn't matter. They reached the basement stairs, Sullivan's voice over radio. "I've got 3 more coming from the rear, engaging." Gunfire erupted from the cottage. Sullivan's rifle, distinctive crack of precision fire. Return fire, automatic weapons, volume over accuracy. They tumbled into the panic room. Harrison slammed the steel door. Engaged locks that would hold against anything short of explosives. The room's monitors showed feeds from exterior cameras still functioning. 7 attackers total. Professional kit, moving like operators who'd done this before. 1 down in the foyer, Marcus's work. 2 pinned by Sullivan's fire. 4 searching the house methodically. "Who are they?" Nina asked. "Mercer's cleanup crew." Harrison checked his weapon. He knew we'd go to Morrison, knew she'd take the evidence. This is him moving first, eliminating witnesses before we can testify. Morrison? Safe. She left hours ago with analysts. She'll be in a DIA facility by now, surrounded by security Mercer can't penetrate. On the monitors, Sullivan made a run for the main house, got 10 feet before suppressing fire drove him back. He was outnumbered and outgunned. Brave man fighting a delaying action. "We can't let them kill him." Elena moved toward the door. Harrison blocked her. "We go out there, we die. This room's designed to withstand siege. We wait for backup." "What backup? By the time anyone arrives, Sullivan's dead, and they're setting up to breach this room. Then we hold until they give up or run out of time." Marcus checked his ammunition. "Colonel, respectfully, these guys aren't giving up, and we've got maybe 20 minutes before they bring something big enough to get through that door." Harrison's jaw worked. Calculations running, tactical assessment, risk versus reward. Finally, he keyed his radio. "Sullivan, status. Pinned, cottage. They're maneuvering to flank. I've got maybe 5 minutes before they overrun my position. Can you make it to the woods?" "Negative. They've got the open ground covered." Harrison looked at Elena, at Marcus, at Nina. Saw determination in young faces that hadn't yet learned to properly fear death. "All right, here's what we do. I draw their attention, create opening. Marcus, you extract Sullivan. Nina, you provide overwatch from second floor. Elena, you're with me. No arguments. We need everyone." They moved. The panic room door opened into chaos. The attackers had reached the basement, 2 of them clearing rooms methodically. They turned toward the opening door. Marcus hit them like a freight train. Literally. 6'4", 240 pounds, moving at full sprint. He took the first man down with brutal efficiency. The second raised his weapon. Elena fired 3 times. The man dropped. They cleared the basement, moved upstairs slick with blood from the foyer casualty. The house had become a battlefield. Furniture destroyed, walls punctured, the smell of gunpowder and violence. Nina reached the second floor, set up position covering the front approach. Her rifle barked twice, Someone outside screamed. Harrison and Marcus moved toward the back door. Elena covered their six, watching for threats from interior rooms. Sullivan's voice crackled. "They're coming! East side! 3 of them! Hold position! We're coming to you!" They burst through the back door into night that had become hostile territory. Muzzle flashes from the cottage, Sullivan firing carefully, conserving ammunition. Return fire from 3 positions, suppressing, preparing for final assault. Harrison went left, Marcus right. Classic flanking maneuver. Elena stayed center, providing covering fire that made the attackers choose between pressing their assault or seeking cover. They chose cover. Marcus reached Sullivan's position first. "You hit?" "Negative, but I'm down to 1 magazine." "Then let's move before that changes." They ran, Elena and Harrison laying down covering fire. The attackers responded, but their fire was less disciplined now. They'd expected easy targets. Finding trained resistance had changed their calculations. The tree line offered cover. They reached it, regrouped. 5 against 4 now. Better odds, but the attackers still had superior position and equipment. Harrison's radio came alive. Different voice, older, familiar. "Colonel Harrison, this is Admiral Mercer. I believe we need to talk." Harrison and Elena exchanged looks. He keyed the radio. "We don't have anything to discuss, Admiral, except maybe the charges you'll face when this is over." "When this is over, Colonel, you'll all be dead and buried in those woods. No witnesses, no evidence. Just a tragic incident where some recruits and their training officer ran afoul of domestic terrorists." Mercer's voice carried aristocratic contempt. "I've been cleaning up messes like this for 40 years. You really think you're the first people to try exposing me? We're the first with proof. Proof I'll have destroyed by morning. General Morrison's analysts? They work in a facility I helped design. Getting access to their findings will be trivial. The originals? Robert's dead drops? Already located and sanitized. You have copies, yes. But copies can be dismissed as forgeries without originals to authenticate against." Harrison's face went pale. "You're bluffing." "Am I? How do you think Carlos Vega knew to search Elena's barracks?" "Because I've had her under surveillance since the day she enlisted. I knew about the journal, knew she'd eventually decode it, knew she'd come looking for validation. And when she found you, when you led her to Robert's dead drops, you completed the chain. Showed me where everything was hidden. I should thank you for that." Elena felt ice in her veins. They'd been played, used, led Mercer straight to evidence he'd spent 40 years searching for. "So what now?" she asked. "You kill us and call it terrorism?" "No, Ms. Reeves. I'm going to offer you the same choice I offered your father. Walk away, disappear, live quietly, never speak of this again. In exchange, I let you live. The same choice that ended with my father in a Soviet prison. Your father refused my generous offer, chose principle over survival. I hope you're smarter than he was. And if we refuse, then my people finish what they started. You die in those woods." Morrison gets briefed that the evidence was fabricated by conspiracy theorists with military training. "The story dies with you, and I continue serving my country for another comfortable decade before retiring to a beach somewhere warm." The channel went silent. Mercer had said his piece. Given his ultimatum, now he waited for their response. Elena looked at Harrison, at Marcus, at Sullivan, at Nina, visible through the house window, still maintaining overwatch position. "We can't fight them, not with the ammunition we have, not without backup." "Backup's 20 minutes out," Sullivan checked his watch. "Called it in before the attack started. FBI's hostage rescue team. But 20 minutes might as well be 20 hours. Harrison's expression suggested he was calculating impossible mathematics. How to survive 20 minutes against professional killers with superior position and firepower. Then Elena remembered. The panic room, the communications equipment. "The room has satellite uplink, military grade. We can broadcast everything. The evidence, our testimony, all of it. Send it everywhere at once. Media, Congressional oversight committees, inspector generals. Flood the zone so completely that Mercer can't contain it. He'll cut the connection. His people will be monitoring for electronic emissions. Then we transmit fast, everything at once, compressed files, maximum bandwidth. Even if he cuts us off after 10 seconds, it might be enough. It wasn't a good plan. It was a desperate plan. The kind soldiers made when all the good options had evaporated. Harrison nodded slowly. Marcus, Sullivan, you hold this position. Nina stays on overwatch. Elena and I make for the panic room. We get one shot at this. Make it count. They moved, sprinting across open ground toward the house. The attackers opened fire immediately. Rounds snapped past. Marcus and Sullivan returned fire, forcing the attackers to cover. Elena's boots hit the back porch, the door, the kitchen, the basement stairs. Harrison right behind her. They reached the panic room. She dove for the communications console, while Harrison locked them in. The system powered up with agonizing slowness. Military grade meant bulletproof, but not fast. She pulled the encrypted drives from her jacket, the ones Morrison had copied, that Elena had kept back as insurance. Upload screen appeared. She selected everything: photographs, documents, audio files, video testimony they'd recorded, addresses for 50 recipients, major media outlets, congressional staffers known for investigating intelligence community abuses, watchdog organizations, journalists who'd built careers on exposing government malfeasance. Her finger hovered over the send button. Once we do this, there's no going back. We'll be famous or infamous. Either way, our lives change forever. Harrison's hand covered hers. Robert knew you'd be the one to finish this. They pressed the button together. The upload began. Progress bar crawling across the screen. 1%, 2%. Network bandwidth was good. Satellite connection strong. 5%. Gunfire erupted above them. The attackers had breached the house. 10%. Explosions, flashbangs, the sounds of close quarters battle. 15%. Harrison's radio, Nina's voice, strained. They're in the house. I'm pulling back to... Static. Then silence. 20%. Marcus. Sullivan's hit. I've got him, but we need extraction. 25%. The panic room door shuddered. Something hitting it hard. Shaped charges, probably. Designed to breach reinforced steel. 30%. Elena's hands gripped the console, willing the progress bar to move faster. Every percentage point was information getting out. Evidence spreading beyond Mercer's ability to contain. 40%. Another explosion. Closer. The door was failing. 50%. Harrison positioned himself between Elena and the door, drew his pistol. Whatever happens, you keep that upload running. 60%. The door buckled, metal screaming. One more blast would do it. 70%. Elena's radio crackled, different voice. Professional. Authoritative. This is FBI Hostage Rescue Team Alpha. We have the location surrounded. Attackers, drop your weapons and surrender immediately. The gunfire stopped. Sudden silence, more shocking than the violence had been. 80%. Harrison keyed his radio. FBI, this is Colonel Harrison, U.S. Marine Corps. We have wounded. Multiple attackers inside the structure. Copy that, Colonel. Hold your position. We're coming to you. 90%. Elena watched the bar crawl toward completion. Each second felt like an hour. The panic room door hung twisted on its hinges, but the attackers had apparently decided that federal agents changed the tactical equation. 95%. Footsteps on the stairs, voices calling out. Federal agents, if you're in there, identify yourself. Colonel Jack Harrison, we're friendly, don't shoot. 100%. Upload complete. Transmission confirmed to 47 of 50 recipients. 3 addresses bounced. Network errors. But 47 was enough. 47 meant the information was out. spreading beyond recall. Elena sat back, felt tension drain from muscles she hadn't realized were locked rigid. Harrison helped her stand. "Come on, let's go see if we survive this." They emerged from the panic room into a house that looked like a war zone. FBI agents in tactical gear cleared rooms with the methodical efficiency of people who'd done this countless times. Paramedics worked on Sullivan, who'd taken a round through the shoulder but was conscious, pale but determined, pain medication keeping the worst at bay. Marcus sat against a wall, bleeding from a scalp wound, but grinning. "Hell of a night, Colonel." Nina appeared from upstairs, escorted by 2 agents. She had a black eye and a limp, but gave Elena a thumbs up. They'd survived. Barely, but survived. Outside, the attackers were being loaded into vehicles. 4 captured, 3 dead. The professional killers who'd come to eliminate witnesses had instead found themselves witnesses to their own failure. An FBI supervisor approached Harrison. 50s, gray hair, eyes that had seen too much bureaucratic nonsense to be impressed by much. "Colonel Harrison, Special Agent Torres, we got a call from General Morrison about 90 minutes ago. Said you might need backup. Looks like she was right." "Your timing was impeccable, Agent Torres. Actually, our timing was about 5 minutes too late, but it seems you managed." He looked at the destruction. "This is going to be one hell of a report. Multiple casualties, federal officers fired upon, what appears to be a coordinated assassination attempt on U.S. soil. I can help with that report, starting with the name Admiral David Mercer." Torres's expression shifted, became carefully neutral. "That's a name I know. High-level CIA. Connected. This is going to get complicated." "It already is complicated, but we have evidence. More evidence than you can imagine." "Then I suggest we get you somewhere secure and start taking statements. Because if half of what General Morrison told me is true, this is going to be the biggest intelligence scandal since Aldrich Ames." They were transported to an FBI facility in Quantico, debriefed separately. Elena spent 8 hours walking agents through everything: the journal, the dead drops, the photographs and documents, the audio recordings, Mercer's ultimatum over the radio. By the time she finished, dawn had broken over Virginia. She was released into a conference room where Harrison, Marcus, Nina, and Sullivan waited. Sullivan's arm was in a sling, heavily medicated but managing conversation. "It's spreading." Nina had her laptop open, monitoring news feeds. 3 major outlets have published stories in the last hour. CIA scandal. Former deputy director accused of treason. Federal investigation underway. "It's everywhere." Harrison nodded slowly. "Then Mercer's finished. Even with his connections, he can't survive this level of exposure." "Will they arrest him?" Elena asked. "FBI already has. Took him into custody 2 hours ago. He'll face federal charges. Conspiracy, treason, murder of federal officers. If they can prove half of what Robert documented, he'll die in prison." Elena felt something she hadn't expected. Not satisfaction, not joy, just exhaustion. The kind that came from carrying weight for so long that setting it down felt like losing part of yourself. "What happens now?" "Now?" Harrison smiled. "Now you finish what you started. Boot camp, selection, your career. You've earned it." "Have I?" "I violated regulations, accessed classified material, technically committed about 15 different felonies." "You exposed a traitor who spent 40 years killing American intelligence officers." The military understands the difference between breaking rules and doing the right thing. Besides, you have a full-bird colonel and a 4-star general willing to testify on your behalf. Agent Torres entered the conference room. He looked tired but satisfied. "Thought you'd want to know. Mercer's cooperating, giving up names. Apparently his network was more extensive than we thought. We're looking at arrests across multiple agencies. This is going to reshape American intelligence for the next decade." "And the evidence? The originals from the dead drops?" Already secured, your intel was good. We recovered everything from the Nevada site. Mercer's people had located it, but hadn't removed the materials yet. Probably wanted to make sure they had everything before destroying it. Torres pulled out a chair, sat. You did good work, all of you. Your country owes you a debt. Elena thought about her father. About 40 years in a Soviet prison. About dying alone, forgotten, abandoned by the country he'd served. Will you look for him, my father? If there's any chance he's still alive? Torres's expression softened. CIA's already running traces, checking Russian prison records, interviewing defectors, following every lead. But Ms. Reeves, you need to prepare yourself. The chances he survived 40 years in Soviet custody are slim, but we'll do everything we can. I promise you that. They were released that afternoon, driven back to Camp Pendleton in government vehicles with an escort that suggested their newfound fame came with security concerns. The base commander met them personally, congratulated them, suggested they might want to maintain low profiles for a while. Media attention could be disruptive to training. Elena returned to the barracks to find her platoon waiting. They'd seen the news, understood at least partially what had happened. Tyler was there, out of the hospital, still moving carefully, but alive and grinning. You took down a CIA traitor. That's so much cooler than anything I'll ever do. Marcus clapped her on the shoulder. Guess we know where you learned to shoot now. Your dad was a legend. You're living up to that legacy. But it was Nina who understood, who pulled Elena aside and said quietly, You okay? Really? I don't know. I thought finding the truth would bring closure. Instead, it just opened up more questions. That's how truth works. It's messy and complicated and never quite as satisfying as we want it to be. When did you get so wise? About 5 minutes after I nearly died helping you upload classified evidence to the internet. Near-death experiences are very clarifying. Training resumed 3 days later. Elena had expected it to feel different. Instead, it felt exactly the same grinding physical challenges, the same mental tests, the same slow transformation from civilian to soldier. But something had changed inside her. She understood now what her father had known, that service wasn't about glory or recognition. It was about doing what needed to be done, even when no one would ever know you'd done it. 6 weeks after the Arlington meeting, after depositions and debriefings and countless hours of testimony, graduation day finally arrived. The weeks had passed in a blur. Selection continued. Recruits dropped out or were cut. The platoon shrank from 45 to 32 to 20. Elena made it through. Not at the top of her class, not at the bottom. Solidly competent. Exactly where she'd aimed to be. Graduation came on a day that felt like the first day she'd arrived. California sun, heat that made uniforms stick to skin, families in bleachers watching their sons and daughters become something new. Elena had no family present, but Harrison stood in the front row, in dress uniform, wearing the ribbons that told stories he'd never repeat. General Morrison sat beside him, silver hair gleaming, face carrying satisfaction that 40 years of waiting hadn't diminished. When Elena's name was called, when she walked across that platform to receive her certificate, she felt her father's presence. Not literally, not ghost story supernatural, but the weight of legacy, the inheritance of purpose, the understanding that she was continuing something he'd started. Colonel Harrison pinned her Marine insignia, shook her hand. His eyes held pride in something deeper, understanding. After the ceremony, Harrison pulled her aside, handed her an envelope. This came through CIA channels this morning, addressed to you. Elena opened it with hands that had learned not to shake. Inside, a single photograph, black and white, grainy, a man, 70s, weathered by decades, sitting in what looked like a Moscow cafe. His face was turned slightly away from the camera, but enough showed to see the bone structure, the way he carried himself. On the back, handwritten in script she recognized from the journal, still breathing, proud of you, Soon. Elena's breath caught. Is this real? Is he alive? CIA can't confirm. The photo was delivered anonymously. Could be authentic, could be someone playing games. But Elena, the timing, the location, the fact that it came right after Mercer's arrest and his network collapsed. He's alive. He survived. Harrison's hand on her shoulder. Steady. Real. Maybe, and if he is, if he's finally able to come home after 40 years, you gave him that. You and your refusal to accept that justice was impossible. What do I do now? Now? Now you live your life. Continue your training. Become the soldier you came here to be. And if your father does come home, you'll be ready to meet him. Not as the child he left behind, but as the warrior you've become. Elena looked at the photograph, at the man who might be her father, living in shadows, waiting for the moment when shadows were no longer necessary. She thought about the journal, about the tattoo, about legacy and sacrifice, and the price people paid for choosing principle over survival. And she understood, finally, what her father had tried to teach through 40 years of silence. Some things were worth dying for, but more importantly, some things were worth living for, worth fighting for, worth becoming the person you needed to be to protect them. Freedom, truth, justice, the belief that one person, making the right choice at the right moment, could change the world. Her father had made that choice in 1985, had paid the price, but his choice had made hers possible. Now it was her turn to choose, to live up to the legacy, to be the person he'd believed she could become. Elena folded the photograph carefully, put it in her pocket over her heart where the tattoo marked her as her father's daughter. Turned back toward the ceremony where her platoon was celebrating, where Marcus was telling stories, and Nina was rolling her eyes, and Tyler was just happy to be alive. Her family now, the one she'd chosen, the one she'd earned. She walked toward them, toward her future, carrying her father's past, but no longer defined by it. In her pocket, the photograph rested against her heart, a ghost made flesh, or perhaps just hope refusing to die. Either way, it was enough. The war was over, the truth was out, and Elena Reeves, Marine, daughter, warrior, had finally found what she'd been searching for since the day she stepped off that bus. Not revenge, not even justice, purpose.